Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason and I'm here to bring you the retrospective for Poirier versus Hooker. We're going to have about a 2-week layoff before we get to Fight Island, so we're just going to do a retrospective here. And then, of course, we'll have the fight picks leading into that week. Just to kind of recap the night, though, we were 60% accurate. I really would have liked for this to have been 80%. There were two fights that were just going our way, and the fighters managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. We'll talk about it, though. Here's the show. All right, in our main event, we had Dustin Poirier defeat Dan Hooker in what was a spectacular contest. The numbers here show that Hooker actually did outstrike and score more takedowns, but I think you really had to watch this fight in order to understand why Poirier won, because if I look at the numbers here, I can go, maybe Hooker edged this one out. Maybe he got robbed of what could have been a split decision, whatever. Either way, unanimous decision for Poirier. And really, I think it was the damage that Hooker took. There were certain moments in this fight where you just thought that Hooker was going to go out. He was going to crumble like the Barboza fight. He was going to crumble like Rory McDonald taking on Robbie Lawler. It just looked like it was going to go that way. But Hooker is tough as hell. He hung in there, and despite getting his face rearranged, he was able to stave Poirier off, at least until later rounds. Once you get into later rounds, I think Poirier really took over. He really cemented the fifth round for himself, and I think ultimately that's what won him the fight. A lot of people talk about the third round being really close going to Hooker. I thought Poirier honestly had it beyond rounds 1 and 2. I thought Hooker looked great out of the gate, and then Poirier slowly but surely took some of the firepower away by laying some damage down on Hooker. And, because Hooker couldn't exploit his kickboxing and explosiveness and athleticism and length and all of his positive attributes that, he had of a Poirier, because he couldn't exploit those early, Poirier's game took over. The only thing I want to say, though, is for a guy that must have, and this is Poirier I'm talking about, for a guy that must have trained guillotine after guillotine after guillotine against Khabib, he could not pull one off against Hooker. I don't know why he couldn't. I would have just figured, hey, man, here's a guy who probably, almost defeated Khabib with a guillotine. And now he's going up against a guy who wants to take him down and try to nullify his striking, and he still can't lock in the guillotine. So that is something I would have liked to have seen a little bit more proficiency out of Poirier with, considering how much I assume he had to train it. But, hey, everything's in the moment. These guys are sweaty. I understand. It is what it is. Poirier gets a win. We get a W, and so that worked out pretty well for us. And the next one, Mike Perry, Mickey Gall. So I called it out. I said that Mike Perry would probably win here. He was probably the Achilles heel of Mickey Gall, and I ended up being correct here. Mike Perry defeats Mickey Gall. He battered him. I'm not saying Gall didn't hit him, at all, but Gall's takedowns were nullified, okay? For a guy that really didn't have any kind of corner, any kind of real fight camp, he muscled Mickey Gall right off of him every time he shot for a takedown. And he also battered him. So I talked about how Gall has a hard time with really vicious strikers because he himself does not hit that hard, and he was not able to keep Perry off him. Perry walks him down. He keeps hitting him with a barrage of shots, and Mike Perry ultimately picks up a solid victory, one that he really needed. The guy was on a losing streak, so he maintains his career in the UFC, and we'll get to see him fight again, which camp he goes to. I highly doubt he's going to be training with his girlfriend for every fight going forward, but solid win for him and big balls on the man. Also, hats off to him for calling out the IRS. I think that's the really next fight he's going to have. I want to pay less taxes too. I mean, hey, it's just is what it is. Anyways, next one here, Maurice Greene, Jean Volante. In this one, it was scary because I thought Maurice Greene actually looked outclassed by the more experienced Volante. Volante did not come in looking like an athletic specimen, but he did connect with a lot of really good shots on Greene, especially late into round number 3. But I think Volante honestly punched himself out, was on death's door as far as cardio goes, and Maurice Greene was able to hook up that arm triangle to pick up a solid win. But I did not think this one was going to go for us. I thought this was going to be an L for sure, but we ended up picking up a W, and it was a solid win. And the next one, Brandon Allen, Kyle Dockhouse. So, hey, Dockhouse great fight for him. It was, really his first fight in the UFC, and I was high on him. He was a pick that I had made. Brendan Allen just showed that he's a little bit better. He's a little bit better on the ground, and I thought where Dockhouse actually had a small advantage on the feet, that didn't really play out very well. Dockhouse wanted on the ground. He wanted to prove he was a better jiu-jitsu player, and he proved that he has good jiu-jitsu, but maybe not quite to the level of Allen. Plus, when he had his head split open in the first round with that elbow, the blood getting in the eyes, there were a lot of moments where, Dockhouse definitely lost some momentum, lost some of his pathways to victory, and, when you had Allen's back for, I can't remember if it was the second or third round, for about 3 minutes, he really needed to shut the door with that rear naked choke, and he just wasn't able to. I don't know if it was the extra slipperiness of the blood. I'm sure it didn't help, but there were little things, that could have gone differently had Dockhouse, maybe, not been cut open, or could have gotten to that point earlier. Either way, it is what it is. We pick up an L, and Brendan Allen's fantastic talent, so no real harm in losing to him. In the next one, we got correct. Takashi Sato defeats Jason Witt. I think this was actually a replacement fight originally. I think we'd still pick Sato, though, so he ended up winning after we had to crunch for Witt. So it's a W for us. He came out, 48-second knockout. There's not much to say about it. Great win for Sato for sure. In the next one, Juliana Rosa defeats Sean Woodson. One I did not expect. So Woodson, Colby Covington style, is throwing volume shots all night, outstrikes Rosa, but can't manage to keep him off of him. He's just walking him down, and ultimately Sean Woodson gets caught in a choke and loses in the third round. A fight that I thought he was winning. I'm not saying he was handily winning it or anything, but I did think Woodson was ultimately winning the fight. It could have been objective, when you look at octagon control and advancing. Maybe you could have given it to a Rosa, but I thought Woodson was going to pick up a win here, and I ultimately was disappointed. He lost in the third round, about midway through, and he managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And then the same thing, combo worthy Luis Pena. Even though Worthy outstruck him, I thought Pena was winning the fight. I thought he looked good on the ground. Those 3 takedowns were good, and he just overcommits to the takedown and gets caught in that guillotine late in the third round, and ultimately picks up an L. So 2 losses for us, 2 losses that I thought were cruise control to victory, and instead of being 80% accurate, we're going to being 60% accurate because we lose those 2. It is what it is. That is MMA. You cannot take your foot off the gas. You also honestly can't assume you're going to win these either. I know I said we should be 80%, but the judges' scorecards could have easily gone a different way than my perspective. So it is what it is. We take 2 L's on that, and hey, like I said, I'm just going to move on. So then we have Tanner Bozer defeat Felipe Lins. I don't think Lins is really UFC material. I kind of said this when he couldn't defeat Arlovsky. He looked like a real mother effer coming in off of the PFL league. But Tanner Bozer proves that he is a great shaved bear MMA talent. And he actually called out Maurice Greene when he got his victory over Lins. So I do look forward to seeing Bozer fight again. Great victory for him. And then the last 2, Kay Hansen defeats Jinyu Frey. Kay Hansen with a beautiful armbar transition catches Frey. You could see Frey, she knew she had lost. She kind of had a look of disappointment in her face, and then kind of went for the slow tap, just being like, hey, you got me. And great fight. Really high-level stuff out of Hansen. Her kickboxing looked good, considering Frey was certainly, I think, the more experienced kickboxer or striker coming in. So Hansen looked like the real deal as a prospect, and so I do look forward to seeing more of her at her young 20-year-old age. So we got a long road to go for her. And then we finally had Youssef Zalal defeat Jordan Griffin. We call this one correctly. I didn't quite see this one. It was the first fight of the night, but it looks like Zalal struck him about 2-1. And was able to pick up unanimous victory. So, really great start to the night. We got Zalal, Hansen, Sato. I thought I was cruising, and then the Woodson and Pena losses, those were tough to see because I thought we were just going to start cruising through the night. And then, of course, there were some other ones out there like Gall and Dockhouse. The ones that, I knew were on a little bit more shaky ground, but I really thought Pena and Woodson had those fights dead to rights. And, hey, is what it is. I'm just a little disappointed about it. Hey, I'm entitled to be so, right? Anyways, so that's our retrospective. Like I said, 60% accurate. I wanted to go a little bit better. kind of just is what it is, as Max Holloway would say. But speaking of Max Holloway, we do have in 2 weeks a great card over at Yaz Island, or Fight Island as we're calling it, or the UFC's calling it, where we're going to have Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns in the main event, 2 title fights, I guess co-main events, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, Peter Yan, Jose Aldo, they're going for the bantamweight strap, and then we have some number 1 contenders at lady strawweight. We have Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas. We also got Amanda Ribas and Paige Van Zant. And then there is a little bit of a dip as far as names go, but there's 13 fights on this card. We're going to have an Ozdemir fight taking on a debuter. We got Alizo Zaleski dos Santos taking on Muslim Salikov, solid fight. Makwan Armakani versus Danny Henry, Leonardo Santos, Marcin Tybura, a couple of guys on here. You know, it really doesn't, it falls off in the prelims, I guess, but it doesn't mean it can't be exciting, and I'm sure it certainly will be, and I will be here to give you all the best picks that I can, or as close to the best picks as I can. I'm really still bumming about those Pena and Woodson losses. You know, it just, it is what it is. I just got to move on, got to get better. I'll keep crunching, and you just keep listening. So, until I speak with you again for the next set of fight picks for Abu Dhabi, Yaz Island, Fight Island, happy fight picking.